There are many religions in Germany. I would almost say that every major religion is represented in Germany. But how many followers are there, and where are their places of worship? Is Germany more a church state that collects church tax, or is it secular? Let's take a closer look and start with history over 2000 years ago. Even the Germanic tribes, before the influence of the Romans, had their own gods. The best known is Wotanas or Wotan, who was called Odin in the north. Wotan means to inspire to the root. Sunras or Donar, who is known as Thor in the north, simply means thunder. Thursday was also named after Sunras. Taivas, also called Tyr, after whom Tuesday is named, in Swedish this Tisdag, he was the god of law and order. Or Frigga, or Freya, or Frigga, the mother goddess, after whom Friday was named. The influence of these deities, although most completely disappeared in the current spectrum of German belief, is still lingering. The Romans began their conquest of German tribes shortly before Christ. When Rome became Christianized, Christian missionaries also came with Rome to the Germanic territories. In 394 AD, the Roman Empire split into the dominion of Rome and the dominion of Byzantium. This also splits the Christian church into a Roman church and an Orthodox church, which then developed independently of each other. With the fall of Rome, the Frankish Empire developed as a successor state, largely Christian Roman in character and dominating all previous Roman possessions in what is now France, Italy, Benelux, Switzerland, Austria, and parts of Germany. Under Frankish rulers such as Charlemagne, further parts of present-day Germany were conquered, and, for example, the Saxons were forced to be baptized as Christians on pain of death. After the division of the Frankish Empire into what is now France and the Holy Roman Empire, which roughly comprised Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and Italy, both states were Roman Christian. Further conquests towards the east into the Slavic territories were also often carried out in the sense of a crusade to convert unbelievers to Christianity. Even before the Christians, there was a religious group that had arrived with the Romans in the 1st century, the Jews. In a decree from 321, they are explicitly mentioned in Cologne as being allowed to be appointed to the civil council. After that, little is known about their number, and it is not until the great merchant Isaac that they are mentioned again at Charlemagne's court. In the 10th century, there were about 5,000 Jews. In the 11th century, about 20,000 Jews in German lands. Many rulers invited Jewish merchants and gave them opportunities to live and trade. The first synagogue was built in Cologne in 1012. Here the Jews were partly under the explicit protection of the rulers and bishops. In the 12th century, Jews often engaged in credit transactions, as Christians were forbidden to charge interest. However, there were also many agrarians, farmers of a town, or craftsmen with Jewish faith. However, they were not allowed to join the Christian guilds. Coexistence with the Jewish religion was relaxed until the 11th century and only changed with Jewish pogroms during the First Crusade in 1096 under Pope Urban II. The positive attitude of the bishops changed, and there were various laws against Jews. In the Mainz Peace from 1103, for example, they were denied the right to bear arms, and at the Fourth Lateran Council it was laid down that Jews were to be identified by a yellow patch or hat. In 1236, they were placed in a state of chamber servitude. They were now under the protection of Emperor Frederick II, but they had fewer civil rights. On the other hand, they had to pay for their protection. From this time onwards, Jews were quickly denounced as scapegoats for all sorts of things. For example, the epidemic broke out, which then often resulted in pogroms with sometimes several hundreds, sometimes even 1,000 dead Jews. Many Jews then began to move east and settle in the area of Poland-Lithuania. It was there that Yiddish emerged as a mixture language of German, Hebrew and Slavonic. The Roman Church subsequently had its own problems to contend with. At times, for example, 2 or 3 popes had proclaimed themselves to be God's representative on earth at the same time. At such a time, around 1408, Jan Hus from Bohemia, then part of the Roman Empire, now the Czech Republic, came to the fore, and his teaching led to the formation of the Hussites, who rejected, for example, a pope as head of the church, but not the church in general. In 1517, Martin Luther posted 95 theses against the sale of indulgences on the castle church in Wittenberg. Luther wanted more reference to be made to the Bible and the word of Jesus again, rather than to the new rites in the Roman Church. In part, he referred to demands made by Jan Hus. Other reformers were Huldrych Zwingli from Zurich in Switzerland and a few years later Johannes Calvin from Geneva in Switzerland, some of whom demanded similar changes, others more stringent. These gave rise to the Protestant movements, the Lutherans, the Zwinglians and the Calvinists. In addition, there were even more radical reformers such as Thomas Münster, who wanted to abolish the entire order of the estates and whose teaching led to the peasant uprisings. Miguel Serveto y Reves, who rejected the Trinity and was later executed on the order of Johannes Calvin, or Jan Matthys, an Anabaptist who wanted to found an Anabaptist kingdom in Münster in 1534-35 and died there during the reconquest of the city by the bishop's troops. On the 23rd April 1539, the Saxon Duke Henry the Pious had the first Protestant church service held. From 1539 to 1540, he had all the monasteries dissolved and all church properties in Saxony secularized. To settle the disputes, a religious peace of Augsburg was negotiated in 1555. This still results in the city of Augsburg having one more public holiday than any other place in Germany. Martin Luther was also anti-Semite. So despite the dispute between Catholic Church and the emerging Lutherans, Jews were not held in high regard by either side. In fact, their situation actually improved in the Catholic regions. Through Luther's translation of the Bible into German, an important step was taken in the development of language and the standardization of the German language. On the one hand, some words that Luther has to come up with did not exist yet, and on the other hand, there was now one book in the whole of Germany that wrote the words in the same way. Apart from the theological significance, this had a very practical significance for the people in the German lands. But in spite of the Augsburg religious peace, circumstances developed in such a way that in the end it came to the 30 Years' War on the soil of the Holy Roman Empire, in which mainly the Protestant Swedes and the Catholic French went into battle with and against various troops of the sovereigns and the emperor. In the end, negotiations for the Westphalian peace were held in the Catholic Münster and Protestant Osnabrück until 1648. After that, many areas were divided into Protestant and Roman Catholic. Northern Germany was more Protestant and the south more Catholic, although Cologne, for example, was Catholic and large parts of Franconia Protestant. Other more radical movements, such as Anabaptists and their successor groups like the Mennonites or the Hutterites, were persecuted regionally and emerged to Eastern Europe or North America. After the war, the situation of Jews in German lands improved noticeably for the first time. In fact, some Jews from the region around today's Ukraine fled back to German territories when pogroms by Cossacks began there. However, depending on the region, they continued to face persecution in the Holy Roman Empire. Although there had already been initial contacts between Charlemagne and Caliph Harun al-Rashid, and there were Muslim travelers from time to time thereafter, it took until 730s before the first prayer room was built for 22 Muslim soldiers who had been given to the King of Prussia. When the king formed an alliance with the Turkish Sultan in 1761 during the 7 Years' War, many Muslim soldiers defected from Russia to Prussia and formed a Bosniak regiment of over 1,000 men. Beyond that, there was hardly any Muslim life in Germany. In the era of Humanism, ecclesiastical matters became quiet, and with the French Revolution and Napoleon's campaigns of conquest, freer, more secular thoughts also come to the German lands. In 1803, in the Reichsdeputationshauptschluss, the quasi-last law of the Holy Roman Empire, the princes were compensated for the losses of territories on the left bank of the Rhine through Napoleon's conquest, which searched possessions on the right bank of the Rhine. This was a serious step towards secularization. This and later expropriations form the basis of the annual state payments still made today by the Federal Republic of Germany and the Federal States to the Catholic Church and the Protestant regional churches as compensation. Starting in 1921 and again since 2012, a law is currently being drafted that provides for a one-time final compensation. It is expected in 2024. Since the Jews had equal rights in the French Republic, these laws were also adopted in various vassal states in the German Confederation. Prussia also adopted these regulations after its defeat 1806 and even allowed Jewish officers in the army. The improvement of the situation of the Jews in Europe was a topic at the Congress of Vienna. However, despite the far-reaching legal equality, persecution continued thereafter. Arthur Schopenhauer first dealt with Buddhism and introduced it to the German elites. Also, some scholars were also concerned with Hinduism at that time. It remained a theoretical or ethical debate. In 1888, the book Buddhistischer Katechismus, Buddhist Catechism, was published by Friedrich Zimmermann, which he wrote under the pseudonym Subhadra Bhikshu. In 1903, the first Buddhist Missionary Association for Germany was founded. In 1914-1915, the first mosque was built in the Crescent Camp, a prisoner of war camp for Muslim prisoners for the French and English. The Ottoman Empire, which was allied with Germany, had called on all Muslims in the service of France and England to wage jihad. The oldest surviving mosque was built in Berlin-Wilmersdorf in 1924. During the Weimar Republic, the Berlin Ahmadiyya community, which dominated German Islam, repeatedly spoke out against anti-Semitism and racism. However, after the National Socialists came to power, the functions were also filled more and more with National Socialists. The National Socialists tried to build up their own kind of Germanic cult and largely let the Christian churches have their way because their anchorage in Germany was too strong. Also, the Nazis had no particular interest in Islam. They showed it goodwill through their common opposition to Britain and supported radical Muslims in their struggle against the British. As the culprits in all this, they accused the Jews, who had to make themselves identifiable by having their first names clearly Jewish, then later with a Jewish star. Then they were persecuted, rounded up from all occupied territories and murdered by the millions. At the same time, their possessions were stolen to finance the war and the lives of the party elites. Whereas at the beginning of the seizure of power, around 500,000 people of the Jewish faith had been living in the territory of the Weimar Republic, in the next few years almost 280,000 fled from Germany to the rest of the world. After the war in 1955, 15,920 Jews lived in the Federal Republic of Germany. After the Second World War, religious affiliations in West Germany remained largely the same, while in East Germany the policy was atheism. As a result of guest workers from abroad, the number of people belonging to other religions also increased. For example, more Muslims came from Turkey, and with the Greeks, people of the Greek Orthodox faith, similar to the Serbian Orthodox faith of some guest workers from the former Yugoslavia. The people from Spain, Portugal and Italy were mostly Roman Catholics. With further immigration from Africa, America and Asia, there is hardly a religion that does not have a few adherents in Germany. While until a few years ago the majority of Germans belonged to one of the two Christian churches, the Roman Catholic or the Protestant regional church, this had changed due to, among other things, massive church resignations in recent years, and for the first time the majority of Germans no longer belong to the two Christian groups. About 42% of Germans are non-denominational, and thus have no religious faith at all, here green. 24.8% belong to Germany's Roman Catholic Church, here yellow, 22.7% to a Protestant church, here purple. 3.2% are Sunnis and 0.8% Alevis, which is about 700,000. There are about 310,000 followers of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Germany, a good 300,000 followers of the New Apostolic Church, 270,000 of the Roman Orthodox Church, and about the same number of Buddhists. There are just under 200,000 Jews, 100,000 Hindus, and about the same number of Yazidis. There are about 70,000 Alevites and up to 20,000 Sikhs, a few thousand followers of Taoism, and about 1,000 followers of Shintoism. In addition, there are many other Orthodox and free churches. What about the church tax? As early as the Weimar Republic, it was decreed that religious communities that are public corporations, which means that they perform public functions, may also levy tax. These taxes, according to the rate specified by the religious community, are then collected by the tax office together with the other taxes and paid to the religious community after deduction of an expense allowance of usually 3%. Church tax in Germany is calculated as a proportion of income tax. In Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, the rate is 8%, in the other federal states 9% of the income tax. So if you earn 2,000 euro a month in Berlin and pay 126.66 euro in income tax, you will pay 11.40 euro in church tax on top of that. If you consider that some religions expect the tenth, what means the tenth part, that would probably be 200 euro there. The church tax is largely collected nationwide for the Protestant regional churches, the Roman Catholic Church in Germany, the Old Catholic Diocese, a number of free religious congregations, the Unitarian religious community of Free Protestants, Jewish congregations, and the Free Religious Community of Alzey. In the federal state of Hamburg, a part is confiscated by the churches themselves. The Muslim Orthodox and many Free Church congregations refrain from such collection. If you now look at the history of the German states, you can see the long Christian history, which is also reflected in the holidays. Epiphany on the 6th of January, the holidays around Easter and Wotan, Corpus Christi, Ascension Day, and in Bavaria also Assumption Day in the majority Catholic districts, Reformation Day or All Saints Day, formerly in Saxony still the Day of Penitence and Prayer, and of course Christmas make up the bulk of the public holidays. In addition, there is a Sunday rest. There are even some silent holidays with special restrictions depending on the federal state. Famous is the ban on dancing on Good Friday, but this also applies on Volkstrauertag, which is celebrated 2 Sundays before the first Sunday of Advent and is not a holiday but a silent day of remembrance for the fallen of the world wars and the victims of war and violence in general. Germans practice their religions with varying intensity. Some are simply in church out of habit and go to church on high holidays like Easter and Christmas, otherwise rather rarely. Others are very active in their congregations or go to church every Sunday. Many people in the Catholic Church are currently active and want to reform the Catholic Church because they consider celibacy, which was introduced in the Middle Ages out of fear the priests could inherit the church treasures, or the ban on women as priests, to be completely outdated. Also, allegations of abuse, and especially the way abuses has been dealt with and the lack of protection against abuse in the past decades, have turned many people against the way of the Catholic Church deals with it. While an active dialogue on this is underway in Germany, any approach to the laity from Rome has been rejected. Contrary to the early differences, today both German churches, Roman Catholic and Protestant, actively participate in Ecumenism, and especially in schools and kindergarten, joint services often organized. This partially goes beyond these two churches and also include Jews and Muslims. Churches are allowed to have their own rights as workers, which sometimes overrides the workers' rights. For example, the church is allowed to dictate that employees are members of the church and live according to the rules, which the Catholics exclude divorce and sometimes also same-sex cohabitions. If you look at the map, you will find a church in every village. If you want to arrange a meeting point with friends while hiking or cycling, the church, whose tower can be seen from afar, is recommended. The ringing of the bells, which indicates the hours and sometimes the quarter hours as well as calling for church services, can be heard from far and wide throughout Germany. On the other hand, the call of a muezzin are rarely heard outside the mosque, which is partially a mixture of the Muslims' consideration for their neighbors and partially a requirement of the local community administration. The oldest mosque still in existence is the Ahmadiyya Mosque in Berlin-Wilmersdorf, while the largest mosque is the Central Mosque in Cologne. In the Ibn Rushd Goethe Mosque in Berlin, women and men pray together. Since the 1980s, there has also been training for imams in Germany, which women can also attend. The largest Hindu temple is the Sri Kamachi Ampal Temple in Ham. It's the largest Dravida temple in Europe. The Viengyak Pagoda is a center for Vietnamese Buddhists in Hanover. The largest synagogue is the synagogue on Riekestraße in Berlin. The oldest synagogue is the Old Synagogue in Erfurt, the oldest synagogue in Europe with over 900 years. Unfortunately, synagogues in Germany need to be increasingly protected again, as there are again violent and misguided people who gratuitously make Jews the target of violence. The oldest church is Trier Cathedral, whose construction began around the year 340. The tallest church in the world in terms of height is Ulm Minster at 161.53 meters. The longest church is Cologne Cathedral with 134.6 34.49 meter interior nave measurement. Even if the importance of religion in Germany is declining, and even religious people do not question scientific findings such as the age of the earth, the universe, or evolution, the church still have influence. The public broadcaster shows a weekly Word on Sunday on Saturday evening and broadcasts live from a church service on Sunday morning. But some private broadcasters also read or discuss passages from the Bible on current topics. In addition, there are also stations that focus entirely on the topic of faith. The focus of the churches here in Germany, however, is more on the balance and good coexistence, with the emphasis on charity, which here does not stop at the religious affiliation. The churches do a lot of social work at home and abroad through Caritas and Diakonie. The churches are also represented in the governing bodies of the public broadcasters ARD and ZDF to ensure plurality, as are trade unions or women's association, for example. The former federal president from 2012 to 2017, Joachim Gauck, was originally a Protestant pastor and civil rights activist in the GDR. How important is the church for you? Are church and state separate for you? May your God, your goddess, or many gods be with you. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you next time.